Well, Don, not many people left. I don't know the last time that we had one of our own members, or anyone for that matter, address the club twice in the same Rotary year. But today we're going to welcome back Don Nielsen. When Don presented his bold thoughts on public education on November 15th, it was clear that he had tapped into a rich vein of passion and enthusiasm among those in attendance. When I asked if he would come back and answer questions, he quickly agreed. I also asked Don if he would invite some other experts in the field so we might have the benefit of diversity of opinions and viewpoints. Joining Don today are Carla Santorno, Chief Academic Officer of Seattle Public Schools, and Dr. Patricia Wasley, Dean of the College of Education at the University of Washington. Ms. Santorno began her education career more than 30 years ago as a teacher in Denver, Colorado. She moved up to positions of increasing leadership responsibility, most recently as an area superintendent in Denver, where she was successful in raising accountability ratings in 8 out of 10 schools. Dr. Wasley has been Dean of the College of Education since May of 2000. She's a graduate of both Western Washington University and the University of Washington. She is also the author of several books, including Making Change and Kids and School Reform. Fellow Rotarians, please join me in welcoming Don Nielsen, Carla Santorno, and Dr. Pat Wasley.
So nobody left, huh? They all want to see me skewered. Well, it's a pleasure to come back, and I am delighted to be able to address you again and to have such a distinguished panel with me. I was very fortunate to have not only two of the leading educators in our city with us today, but these are two national to have them here today. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the presence of Raj Manhas today, too. Raj is Superintendent of Public Schools. Thank you for being here, Raj. Now, I need to tell you that Pat and Carla are friends, and they will be friends at the end of this meeting. But I have not asked them to tell me what they're going to say. I haven't got a clue what they're going to say. So you're going to hear their views as I hear their views. And they may or may not agree with me, or they may think I've been smoking something I shouldn't have smoked. I don't know. But anyhow, before I introduce them to give you their comments, let me refresh your memory about what I said to you on November 15th. I pointed out that this country is failing its young people, big time. Today, and certainly tomorrow, America's jobs are going to require a minimum of 2 years of post-secondary education in order to achieve a reasonable standard of living in our society. Today, 80% of our children do not achieve that level of academic achievement. This situation puts our economy at risk and most certainly puts our democracy at risk. So to change that situation, I proposed 5 ideas. Number 1, go to an appointed school board for urban systems. Today, 50% of our children are educated in urban systems. Virtually all of those systems have been unable to put together a sustained effort of school improvement. I maintain that the principal cause of this is one of governance. School boards change every 2 years, and this causes a regular change in strategy. Moreover, the type of people running for school boards are not those that are equipped to run large, complex organizations. This situation results in constant turnover of superintendents and a failure to develop any sustained program of improvement. Second, modify certification laws. Certified is no guarantee of qualified. Until it is, why bother? Certification today is something you earn in an education school, and I believe it should be something you earn on the job. A teacher should only be certified after they have proven an ability to have children learn under their care. Further, I believe certification laws tend to keep highly qualified people out of the profession. Third, change the way we select and train leaders. Public education is the only system in our society today where promotion is done by self-selection. I recommended that we develop leadership academies for education leaders and that the selection to these academies be every bit as competitive as those to our existing military academies. I also felt that the position of principal and superintendent should be available to any proven leader, regardless of whether or not they have first been a teacher. Number 4, go to a longer day and a longer year. America has the shortest academic year in the developed world. I suggested we go to a 7-hour day and a 205-day year. By doing so, a child would be in school in the K-12 spectrum 4 academic years longer than they are today. Doing this would make our children more competitive in the global economy, and the longer year would help us make teacher compensation more competitive with other careers. Number 5, and perhaps the boldest thought, eliminate grades. Eliminate grades 1, 2, and 3, and eliminate grades A, B, and C. Grades 1, 2, and 3 are based upon a child's age, not their level of learning. Today you can have a 3rd grade class with people reading at the kindergarten level and students reading at the 5th or 6th grade level. The one thing they have in common is they're all 8 years of age. I propose going to levels based upon a child's learning level and mitigate the age differences in school by going to a longer year and a longer day. I also proposed eliminating grades A, B, and C. Those grades tell us who is smartest, but not who has learned. I suggested we go to standards: above standard, below standard, and standard. If you're below standard, you go to school longer. If you're above standard, you move to the next level, regardless of what month it is. I summarized my talk by stating that our education system today is obsolete. It is an input-focused system, and it needs to be an output-focused system. It is a time-focused system, and it needs to be an achievement-focused system. It is an adult-focused system, and it needs to be a student-focused system. It is a teaching-focused system, and it needs to be a learning-focused system. And it is a group-focused system, and it needs to be an individual-focused system. Well, those were my ideas. I had a lot to say about each one of them, but Carla and Pat have all read my speech, and they have decided whether they agree or disagree. So let's hear what they have to think. We'll start first with Pat.
All right.
You can come up here.
All right, good. Thanks. Good. So I just want you to know that it looks like a fortuitous year to have so many of you in the room dedicated to education. So I just couldn't be happier about that. It's great. And the fact that you've come to listen to Don is a little questionable, but the fact that he invited us is good. That's good. So I just want to start by saying that I agree with the 5 major ideas. I think we should look at appointed school boards in this country. And colleagues of mine at the university have been tracking what's going on nationwide. And I can say a little bit about what's going on later on when we have questions if you want to know. We are constantly in the process of modifying certification laws in the state, and I think it's absolutely our responsibility to make sure that colleges of education are more accountable for the preparation programs for teachers, for principals and superintendents. And we have just built a brand new superintendent program that Don has not yet seen, which I think is I think it is the best in the country, and I think we've been courageous in following some of the recommendations that he's made. He and I have been arguing for some years, and unfortunately for me, I think he has had some undue influence. Fortunate for my college. And I'd also think that it's worthwhile thinking about lengthening the day and the year. And I think that the elimination of age grouping is really wise. One of my colleagues, an emeritus faculty member at the University of Washington, wrote the book on elimination of both grades and age grouping in 1963. We have projects that have been going all over the United States. It makes perfect sense. Those of you who have children know that they learn at different rates. We should not group kids by age. It's a stupid practice. Now, given that I agree with him, that doesn't make for a very interesting conversation. So what I want to do is to say that I think embedded in his comments are some misassumptions, and that we as a society have made a couple of mistakes. I'd like to describe those. There are 4 of them, and then I'd like to say what I would do if I were in charge of the education world. And they add some new thoughts to those that Don has put forward. But I do believe he would agree with me, and we'll find out. First of all, the first misassumption, I think, Don makes quite a substantial point about the fact that having subject matter expertise is critical to educating children well. And he suggests that we do it backwards, that we educate children or teachers to teach, not to have subject matter expertise. I want to make the point that it isn't enough to have subject matter expertise. One of the things that we know there are 3 new science of learning centers in the United States. We have one of them at the University of Washington, the only one not in a med school, the only one headed by a college of education. And what we're doing is collecting research on learning. And what we know is that experts in their fields generally find the subject matter so easy that they find it very difficult to explain complex concepts to kids who don't find them so friendly. So we need both. We need teachers who have great subject matter expertise, but we also need people who have the capacity to teach children. And children differ, as you know. They are mysteries to be unlocked. And having so many of them in a room makes teaching quite a challenge. Okay, so I think having expertise is not enough. I think also Don makes several international comparisons, and I think in some cases the international comparisons are misleading for us. I've been to schools in Japan and China. I've taught in 3 different countries. I've taught all grade levels from elementary school through high school, and I just want to say that when you go to school in Japan, which I did last year, and China the year before, the classrooms are homogeneous. These kids they're all the same race and ethnicity, and many of them share religious values and so forth. It's not the kind of melting pot that we find in our classrooms today. So having homogeneous classrooms makes quite a difference in the tasks that we undertake and the goals that we undertake. I think it's also true that those countries have national curricula. In this country, every single school board and every single district office is able to select its own curriculum. So that makes it very hard for us to make sense of what it is children are learning, one grade to the next, one school building to the next, one district to the next. And we have huge mobility rates in this country. Kids are moving like crazy. So it's really critical that we don't look at international comparisons and oversimplify. The third thing, this is the thing that just gets me. It makes me kind of want to move to China. And that is that as a teacher in the United States, most teachers have 5, high school teachers have 5 planning periods, have 5 different classes, and 1 hour for planning. In Japan, a teacher teaches for 2 hours during the day, is paid for 8, and has enormous planning time. In China, teachers teach for 3 hours a day. They are paid for 8. They spend the rest of the time developing lesson plans and grading students' work. We make a huge misassumption when we assume that teachers can keep it moving with a different group of kids every hour and reach their needs. It's just not possible. Okay, so third assumption that I want to challenge. In the United States, we have spent billions of dollars nationwide raising the standards. It's a really important thing that we've done. We have 49 states have put standards in place. We've then spent billions of dollars creating standardized tests in order to measure whether, in fact, kids are successful. We've made no commensurate investment in teacher professional growth. So it's like, I think about this when I think about the Olympics coming to Whistler, right? I think about, okay, so the ski team coach says, we're going to bring home more gold medals this year. You people figure out how to get over those new jumps. You figure it out, and you pay for it, because that's what we do to teachers. Now, a coach would never ask an Olympic team to perform at a higher level without increasing the support they get, the coaching they get, and without staged professional development that enables them to be successful. We have not done that for teachers. We have not made that investment in improving teachers' skills. Okay, so the last issue that I want to take up is that I actually agree with Don about the certification issues in colleges of education, but I would phrase it differently, right? I think that we have made, as colleges of education, a huge mistake. I mean, huge. And that mistake is this. We tell you that when a student leaves our one-year master's in teaching program that they are prepared to teach. No med school would ever do that. No med school would do that. They give you a 3-year internship under the supervision of experienced doctors, and they pay you for that internship. We do not have a system like that. So I always tell people that I did my first 2 years in Australia, and I've always been deeply grateful because it was so far away that none of you got to know how bad it really was in my classroom. But I mean, I just flew by the seat of my pants because I had 150 kids a day, and I was supposed to unlock the learning needs of every single one of those children. It's very hard work. It's very complicated. And we need to support teachers in very different ways, I think. Okay, so what would I do? Wait, I forgot. The other thing that we do wrong in this country that is really horrendous is that our teacher assignment policies are really, they're medieval. We assign the newest teachers to the hardest classes. We assign our newest teachers to the most underprivileged schools. And we take our most experienced teachers and put them in the honors courses that are smaller in size, where kids are more eager to learn, and so forth. It's completely backwards. And having such teacher assignment policies makes it really, really, really difficult for teachers to be successful with the children they serve. So what would I do? First of all, I would create a statewide curriculum. It's a controversial issue, but the bottom line is I think we should have a statewide curriculum because I think that makes it easier for superintendents, principals, teachers to be clear about what we want kids to know and be able to do. Second, I would build a statewide data system that requires colleges of education and school districts to track their students. We have a reasonable system for school districts to track student achievement. We do not have the data system in place for colleges of education to track our graduates, and we should. It's our responsibility to be accountable. Third, I would create and pay for a comprehensive teacher induction system where teachers get regular, daily support to become highly effective teachers. I think we need the same kind of internship system that medical schools have. And then last of all, I would create a merit pay system for teachers, principals, and superintendents. I'm pretty sure Don agrees with me on that. I think that people need incentives to improve the quality of their performance, and I think that we ought to push to get that in place. And finally, I think I said earlier, I really would think about new strategies for appointing school boards, but I would also add a metric for measuring school board performance. I think we should also have a metric for evaluating the quality of legislation passed in relationship to success in the objectives for education. So I think that everybody involved in the education system should be accountable for the work that they do to improve our system. And it really gives me enormous heart that you're all here because I'm quite hopeful that you can get this done. And now we'll hear from Carla.
First of all, I always agree with Don. The most poignant thing I think that Don said is that this is a democracy, and that in order for us to preserve that democracy, we've got to have good schools. And having good schools means that we have to educate all students. And I think that he's absolutely correct, that it's more important now than it ever has been. Because there was a time when, my father didn't make it past the 6th grade, but he was a very successful brick mason. He became a bricklayer, and he owned his own company, and, he is a great success. And that's with a 6th grade education. No longer can you make that. Can you do that? Even to be a brick mason, he was showing me all the different. When I was home at Christmas, he was showing me all the different calculations and things you have to do to be a bricklayer. So he wouldn't have been able to be a bricklayer today. And so I think it is real important that we come together as a society. And I think that the thing that undergirds my comments more than anything else, and has to do with the amount of people that are in this room also, is that this is no longer just a school problem. The schoolhouse cannot take care of it by itself. We have families out there that are changing and are more diverse, and in order for us to support schools, we have to have a populace that supports our schools and is invested in the change. I don't believe an appointed school board will make any difference. What's important to me in a school board is that they're not the ones that are making the changes on their own, but that we have a community that's invested in education and is invested in sustaining the changes that we make, along the way. And actually, I'm real invested in making sure that I have that I preserve that democracy and that I have the ability to elect, those officials that I want. But I don't want it to be so partisan that every time, there's a school board change, I have to worry about, whether my child's going to be educated. The thing that I've said over and over, if you've heard me before, you know what I say over and over again, is everything we need to know to educate students, we know. It's not a mystery. It's not a surprise. It's not magic. We know what it is that we have to do. We have to teach them to read by the 3rd grade. We have to make sure that they're ready for kindergarten. We have to make sure that they have higher math concepts. We have to make sure they get through the 9th grade. And we have to make sure that they have work skills to go into the populace. And there's ways that teachers can teach that we get that we get those results, and so whether or not we make it depends on how we care. And I think that part of it is that we have to get everybody involved, in this endeavor. If I go past 5 minutes, you're going to have to start waving because I'm going to get going here in a minute. The second thing is certification. I have to repeat what Pat said, is it's more than just about content. 25 years ago, when I went to a recruiting fair, I would go to a university and I would interview young people who wanted to be teachers. And one of the questions I always asked was, how long have you wanted to be a teacher? And they all said, I've been wanting to be a teacher since I was in kindergarten. I wanted to be a teacher since I was a little girl. My mother told me that when I was 6 or 7 years old, I was already holding school in my basement. I didn't know I was the daycare for the neighborhood, but I taught school every day. And so now I go to recruiting fairs and I go and I say, how long have you wanted to be a teacher? And people say, well, the oil business fell last year, so I got to find something to do. Let me tell you, you can tell the difference in the classroom with those two things. And again, we do need content-rich teachers, and we do need to modify our certification system. We need to make sure that we have teachers that have a strong basis in content, and not only that they have a strong basis in content, but also they know how it works in the real world. They didn't learn it in a book and learn it in a classroom and have never had any idea how it works out in the real world. And that's where you can help us. We need to have teachers doing internships and teachers doing practical, in things out into the community so that they know. The best teachers I've ever seen are a good mix of a good content rich. I was at South High School before the break and watched a math teacher that used to be a science teacher that used to be a geologist. And for every single thing he taught those kids, he talked to them about how it worked in the real world. And guess what? They paid attention because he knew what he was talking about. And so we do need to modify our certification standards and make sure we have kids that have content. We need to pair up with the arts and scientists. So it's not that you learn math over here in the arts and scientists and then you learn math over here in the education and never meet. Pat's doing a great project out at Garfield High School where the math department is working with the education department to make sure that teachers have that real world math experience along with the pedagogy that goes with how do you teach these concepts to kids, because that is so important. You can't teach kids unless you love them, especially these days. You better be in the classroom because you love kids and you want to be there. Leaders. I think the main thing is that the leadership in a school, that the requirements for leadership in a school have changed so much. So now you have to really understand business concepts, you have to understand law, you have to understand education, and you have to understand leadership and management. And those are all skills that you didn't, and also you have to understand, don't let me forget this, you have to understand instruction. You have to know what teaching looks like. You have to be able to recognize it when you see it, and you have to be able to coach teachers to say, that's not what it looks like, let me tell you what it does look like. And so we make a mistake, I believe, when we think that anybody can do this job. It's a mix of skills that you have to bring together. And I think that Don is right, that we have to look at programs and make sure that they prepare people across, those different fields, and that we do take people that come from different, different vocations. But to expect them to do a good job without having that educational piece, I think is a misnomer. We have to look at that. When I read Don's speech, I read it on the internet, I sent him an email, and I said, whoa, you're way before your time. The whole idea about grades is amazing to me. Do you know we were talking about this 30 years ago? 30 years ago, we were talking about getting rid of grades. And so why are they still here? It's because every one of you right here in this room wants to go home and see an A on that dadgum report card, and you know it, okay? This is not a schoolhouse program problem. This is a society problem. We want to rate our kids, absolutely. And I have been in 3 school systems that tried to change grades, and the public killed them, knocked them straight on their butts, because they want to make sure that their kid, how in the world are we going to know that my kid's better than yours if my kid doesn't have an A and yours has a C? So there is a fundamental change that we have to make in how we feel about kids. And when Harvard Law School says it doesn't matter what your grade point average is, if you can do this, you can come, things will change.
Hey. Well done, nice choice. Is there anyone here who's surprised to learn that there were no discipline problems in Ms. Santorno's class? Thank you, Don. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Carla. Great job. Thanks again to all of our program participants. Bill Lux, we are honored to have you as a member of this great club, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Next week, January 10th, we will be in the Cascade Ballroom at the Westin Hotel, where our speaker will be Bob Kapp on the topic of sustainability of China's explosive growth, environmental sustainability, and long-term sustainability. Bob happens to be a friend of mine and one of my predecessors as president of the Washington Council on International Trade. He's a great speaker. I wish I'd thought of inviting him to speak. It wasn't my idea. It was David and some of the program committee. Anyway, great idea. This week's pretty good rule. A good one to start the new year. Take care of yourself. You're going to live longer than you expect. And good health is a joy and productivity multiplier. Death is nature's way of telling you it's time to slow down. See you next week. We are adjourned.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from Enterprise Seattle. For over 35 years, Enterprise Seattle has provided client-based economic development services to businesses throughout King County and its 39 cities. More information on Enterprise Seattle and how they help businesses grow and prosper can be found at www.enterpriseseattle.org. And by First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.